Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock on his computer screen. 3 in the morning. The deep space monitoring station was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the distant sound of air recyclers. Most of the crew was asleep in their quarters, but Jake had the night shift in the communications room. He stretched in his chair and took another sip of cold coffee. Working on the New Horizons station wasn't the most exciting job in the solar system, but someone had to listen for signals from deep space. Most nights Jake heard nothing but the background noise of the universe. Stars dying, planets spinning, the endless whisper of cosmic radiation. Tonight felt different. At first, it was just a faint beeping that made Jake sit up straighter. He adjusted his headphones and checked his equipment. The signal was weak, but steady, coming from somewhere far beyond the solar system. Jake had been doing this job for 3 years, and he knew the difference between natural space noise and something made by intelligence. This was definitely not natural. Jake's fingers moved quickly over his control panel, trying to clean up the signal. The beeping had a pattern to it. 3 short beeps, 3 long ones, 3 short again. Then a pause, and the pattern repeated. It reminded Jake of old Morse code, but this was different, more complex. "What the hell?" Jake whispered to himself. He recorded the signal and ran it through the computer's analysis programs. The results made his heart beat faster. The signal showed mathematical patterns that only came from intelligent sources. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. Jake reached for his phone and called Dr. Lisa Parker. She was the station's expert on alien languages, though until now that had been a job with no real work to do. Lisa answered on the 3rd ring, sounding sleepy and annoyed. "Jake, do you know what time it is?" she said. "Lisa, you need to get down here right now," Jake said, his voice excited. "I think we just received our first message from aliens." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Lisa said, "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. This signal has mathematical patterns that can't be natural. Someone is trying to talk to us. I'll be there in 5 minutes," Lisa said and hung up. Jake spent those 5 minutes recording more of the signal and running every test he could think of. The signal was definitely coming from outside the solar system, from a star system about 40 light-years away. It was being broadcast on multiple frequencies, which meant whoever was sending it really wanted someone to hear it. Lisa arrived in the communications room wearing sweatpants and an old university t-shirt. Her red hair was messy from sleep, but her green eyes were alert and focused. She sat down at the computer next to Jake and put on a pair of headphones. "Play it for me," she said. Jake played the recorded signal. Lisa listened carefully, her face getting more serious with each repetition. After a few minutes, she started typing on her computer, running the signal through translation programs that had been designed to decode alien languages, even though no one had ever expected to use them. "This is incredible," Lisa said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The mathematical base is different from ours, but I can see the patterns. Give me an hour and I think I can start to decode this." Jake nodded and continued monitoring the signal. It was getting stronger, which meant whoever was sending it was putting more power behind the transmission. That suggested urgency. An hour later, Lisa had made progress. She had identified number patterns and what looked like simple words. The aliens used a base 8 mathematical system instead of humanity's base 10, but the principles were the same. "I've got fragments," Lisa said, excitement clear in her voice. "Words like help and danger and attack. This isn't a greeting, Jake. This is a distress call. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Can you get more?" Lisa worked for another hour while Jake kept recording. Slowly, she began to piece together longer phrases. The translation wasn't perfect, but the message was becoming clear. "Listen to this," Lisa said, reading from her computer screen. "We are the Cathara of the fourth planet of Kepler 442. We send this message to the Deathworlders of the third planet of Sol. Our world is under attack by the Vrakthar horde. They enslave our people and destroy our cities. We know you are a violent species from a death planet, but we beg for your help. We have studied your world from afar. Only Deathworlders could survive on such a hostile planet. Only Deathworlders might be strong enough to fight the Vrakthar." Jake and Lisa stared at each other in shock. Aliens not only knew about Earth, but they thought humans were some kind of super dangerous species. They were asking for help in a war. "There's more," Lisa said, continuing to read. "The Vrakthar have taken millions of our people as slaves. Their ships block out our sun. Our warriors cannot stand against their weapons. We do not know if this message will reach you, or if you will care about the fate of strangers, but we are desperate. If you receive this, please know that the Cathara will remember any help you give us. We will honor the Deathworlders who answered our call." The message repeated every 10 minutes, each time with small changes as more information was added. The Cathara described their attackers as a nomadic empire that moved from system to system, conquering civilizations and taking slaves. They had been fighting for 6 months and were losing badly. Jake stood up from his chair, his mind racing. "We have to tell Commander Rodriguez about this." Lisa nodded, still reading the incoming messages. "Jake, they're calling us Deathworlders. They think Earth is so dangerous that only the toughest species in the galaxy could live here. They're scared of us, but they're so desperate that they're asking for our help anyway." Jake thought about that as he walked to wake up the station. Commander. Humans had always wondered what first contact with aliens would be like. Most people imagined peaceful meetings and exchanges of knowledge. No one had expected aliens to already know about humanity and to think of them as the scary species in the galaxy. But here they were, and somewhere 40 light-years away, people were dying while waiting to see if the Deathworlders would answer their call for help. Commander Alex Rodriguez was not happy about being woken up at 4 in the morning, but his attitude changed quickly when Jake explained what they had found. Within minutes, Rodriguez was in the communications room, listening to the alien message with a grim expression on his face. "How sure are you about this translation?" Rodriguez asked Lisa. "Pretty sure," she replied. "The basic mathematics are solid, and I've confirmed the key words through multiple approaches. This is definitely a distress call from an alien civilization under attack." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, staring at the communication equipment as if it might provide answers. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sending this up the chain of command immediately. This is way above our pay grade." He looked at Jake and Lisa. "Good work, both of you. You just made history." As the commander left to send emergency communications to Earth, Jake and Lisa continued monitoring the alien signal. The messages kept coming, growing more desperate with each transmission. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, people were dying, and they had asked humanity for help. The question now was, what would humanity do about it? President Maria Santos had been in office for 2 years, but she had never faced anything like this. She sat at the head of the long table in the secure conference room deep beneath the White House. Around her sat the most powerful people on Earth, all looking as shocked as she felt. The alien message played through the speakers for the 3rd time. Even though everyone in the room had read the translation, Hearing the actual alien sounds made it more real. These were not human voices, but they were asking for help in a way that touched something deep in human nature. "So, let me understand this correctly," said General Frank Collins, his weathered face showing doubt. "Aliens who have been watching us think we're some kind of super soldiers because we live on Earth?" Dr. Ryan Hughes, Earth's top expert on biology, nodded from across the table. "It makes sense when you think about it. Earth is incredibly hostile compared to most planets. We have earthquakes, hurricanes, diseases, predators, extreme temperatures. Most life in the universe probably evolved on much calmer worlds. They called us deathworlders," added Admiral Kate Bennett, the head of humanity's small but growing space navy. "That suggests they think our planet is so dangerous that only the toughest species could survive here." Intelligence Director Sam Tyler looked up from his tablet. "Our deep space telescopes have confirmed the situation. The Cathara system shows massive energy signatures consistent with orbital bombardment. There are definitely ships there, and they're not Cathara ships." President Santos rubbed her temples. She had been hoping this was all some kind of mistake or hoax. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Over 200, Tyler replied grimly. "Big ones. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of ours. If these Vrakthar are really as advanced as the Cathara say, any human ship that goes there will be flying into a death trap." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Humanity had just learned they were not alone in the universe. And the first news was that there was a war going on. A war they were being asked to join against an enemy that could crush them without breaking a sweat. General Collins leaned forward. "Madam President, I have to advise extreme caution here. We don't know anything about these aliens. For all we know, this could be a trap. Maybe the Vrakthar are the good guys, and the Cathara are lying to us." "The evidence doesn't support that," Dr. Hughes said quietly. "I've been studying the biological data they sent us. The Cathara are herbivores. Their entire society is built around farming and peaceful cooperation. The Vrakthar, from what we can tell, are nomadic raiders. They move from system to system, taking what they want." Admiral Bennett spread out a star chart on the table. "The Cathara system is 40 light-years away. With our best ships, that's a 3-week journey each way. If we're going to help, we need to decide quickly." "Help with what?" General Collins asked, frustration clear in his voice. "We have 12 ships capable of interstellar travel. They're facing over 200 enemy vessels with superior technology. This isn't help, it's suicide." President Santos looked around the table at her advisors. These were smart people, and they were scared. She didn't blame them. But something about this situation felt important in a way she couldn't explain. "What do we know about human military history when facing superior numbers and technology?" she asked. General Collins almost smiled. "We usually lose, ma'am, but sometimes we win anyway." "How?" "Tactics, ma'am. Speed, aggression, and doing things the enemy doesn't expect. But that only works if you know how to fight and your enemy doesn't know how you fight." Admiral Bennett nodded. "The Vrakthar have been conquering civilizations for who knows how long. They probably have standard tactics that work against everyone they've fought, but they've never fought humans. Because no one has ever fought humans in space," General Collins pointed out. "We don't even know if our tactics will work in space battles." Dr. Hughes looked up from his notes. "The Cathara sent us detailed information about Vrakthar tactics and technology. They're sharing everything they know because they're desperate. That gives us an advantage." Intelligence Director Tyler nodded. And they think we're deathworlders. The Vrakthar probably think so too. They might underestimate us, or they might be scared of us. Either way, it could work in our favor. President Santos was quiet for a long moment. Outside the secure room, the world continued as normal. People went to work, children went to school, and life continued as it had for thousands of years. But everything had changed in the last 24 hours. "I want to hear from everyone," she said finally. "General Collins?" "It's a bad idea, ma'am. We're risking our entire space fleet on the word of aliens we've never met to fight other aliens we know nothing about. The smart play is to stay home and prepare our defenses." "Admiral Bennett?" "I think we should go, ma'am. These Cathara are being slaughtered, and they asked for our help. Humanity has always answered distress calls. This is just the first one. From space. Dr. Hughes? From a scientific standpoint, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. First contact with 2 alien species, plus whatever we can learn from Vrakthar technology. But more than that, the Cathara seem to be genuinely peaceful. People who don't deserve what's happening to them. Director Tyler? Intelligence-wise, we need to know what's out there. If the Vrakthar are really a conquering empire, they might come for Earth eventually. Better to fight them somewhere else than in our own solar system. President Santos nodded and looked around the table one more time. Then she stood up and walked to the window, even though it only showed a wall since they were underground. The weight of the decision felt enormous. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. A young Marine lieutenant entered and saluted. President Santos recognized him as Danny Clark, one of the Marines who had been assigned to guard the meeting. "Excuse." "Me, ma'am," Lieutenant Clark said. "I know I'm not supposed to speak, but I heard the debate. May I say something?" President Santos looked at General Collins, who shrugged. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." Danny Clark was 25 years old and had lost his parents in a terrorist attack in Tokyo 2 years earlier. He had joined the Marines afterward, driven by a need to protect others the way no one had been able to protect his family. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about what makes us human," he said, his voice steady despite speaking to the most powerful people on Earth. "We've spent thousands of years learning to protect each other. We've built societies based on helping people who can't help themselves. Now someone else needs protection and we're going to let them die because we're scared?" The room was completely silent. Danny continued, "My parents died because evil people hurt innocent people, and no one was strong enough to stop them. Now we have a chance to be strong enough. Maybe we'll fail, but at least we'll have tried." General Collins looked at the young Marine with something like pride. "Lieutenant, you're dismissed." After Danny left, President Santos returned to her seat. "I want a vote. All in favor of sending a rescue mission to help the Cathara?" One by one, hands went up around the table. Even General Collins raised his hand, though he shook his head as he did it. "Unanimous," President Santos said. "Admiral Bennett, how quickly can you get a fleet ready?" 72 hours, ma'am. I'll take our 3 best ships and whatever support. Vessels can make the journey. Do it, President Santos said. She looked around the table one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to find out what it really means to be human in a galaxy full of aliens." As the meeting ended and people filed out to begin preparations, President Santos stayed behind for a moment. Through the speakers, she could still hear the faint sound of the alien distress call, repeating its desperate plea across the empty darkness between the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying while waiting to see if the Deathworlders would come to help. Now they had their answer. Admiral Kate Bennett stood on the observation deck of the orbital shipyard above Earth, watching the frantic activity below. 3 days ago, these ships had been on routine patrol missions. Now they were being converted into humanity's first interstellar war fleet. The heavy cruiser Earth's Defiance was the largest ship in the fleet. Captain Nick Peterson had commanded her for 2 years, mostly escorting cargo ships between Earth and Mars. Now his ship was being fitted with experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. "How are we looking, Chief?" Admiral Bennett asked as Chief Engineer Greg Anderson joined her at the window. Greg wiped grease from his hands with a dirty rag. He was a big man with thick arms and a beard that was always slightly singed from working around plasma conduits. "Well, Admiral, the good news is that all 3 ships will be ready to fly in 12 hours. The bad news is that half the weapons we're installing have never been fired outside of a laboratory. Below them, the assault carriers Liberty and Justice were getting similar upgrades. Captain Sophie Martinez commanded Liberty, while Captain Tony Walsh had Justice. Both ships were smaller than Earth's Defiance but carried more fighters and troops." "What? About the experimental shields?" Bennett asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Greg said with a grin that made Bennett nervous. "The Cathara sent us detailed scans of Rakthar weapons. Our computer models say our new shield should work, but computer models and reality don't always agree. We won't know for sure until someone shoots at us." Admiral Bennett nodded grimly. That was the story of this entire mission. Everything was theoretical until they actually faced the enemy. Dr. Emma Young approached them, carrying a medical bag that looked heavier than usual. She was the fleet's chief medical officer, a small woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes. "Admiral, I need to talk to you about treating alien injuries." "What's the problem, Doctor?" "I don't know Cathara biology well enough to treat them if they're wounded," Emma said. "They sent us basic information, but it's like trying to perform surgery with a children's picture book as a guide." Greg looked confused. "Aren't we going there to fight the Vrakthar, not treat the Cathara?" "If we're successful, there will be wounded Cathara civilians who need medical help," Emma explained. "Their message said millions of their people are being held prisoner. Many of them are probably hurt or sick." Admiral Bennett understood the problem. "What do you need, Doctor?" "More information, and someone who can translate medical terms in real time. I've asked Lieutenant Amy Brooks to be my assistant. She's the best linguist we have." Amy Brooks was 28 years old and spoke 7 human languages fluently. For the past 3 days, she had been working 18-hour shifts, learning to communicate with the Cathara. She had made more progress than anyone had thought possible. Amy's already established two-way communication with their scientists, Admiral Bennett said. "She's been our link to everything we know about the enemy." Down in the communications center, Amy was indeed talking with aliens. The conversation was taking place through text messages that took 20 minutes each way. To travel between Earth and the Cathara system. Despite the delay, she had learned an enormous amount. "Hello, Veltar," Amy typed. "This is Amy from the human fleet. Can you tell me more about Vrakthar battle tactics?" 20 minutes later, the reply came back. "Greetings, Amy of the Deathworlders. I am surprised that you use names so similar to ours. The Vrakthar fight in rigid formations. They expect their enemies to do the same. Their ships are powerful but slow to change tactics." Amy smiled and typed back. "Humans don't like rigid formations. We prefer to adapt quickly. What else should we know?" While Amy gathered intelligence, Marine Colonel Chris Taylor was training his forces for combat in unknown environments. Chris was a veteran of fights on 3 different planets and 2 moons. He was tough, smart, and absolutely fearless. "Listen up," Chris shouted to the assembled Marines in the training bay. "In 48 hours, we're going to be fighting aliens on an alien planet. Everything you know about combat still applies, but everything you don't know might get you killed." The Marines were spread out across the training area, practicing with weapons and equipment they had never used before. Some of the gear was human-made, modified for fighting in different gravity and atmosphere. Other equipment was based on Cathara designs, built from their transmitted blueprints. Sergeant Paul Garcia raised his hand. He was a squad leader with 10 years of experience and a reputation for getting his people home alive. "Sir, what do we know about Vrakthar ground forces?" "Good question, Garcia," Chris replied. "The Cathara say they're bigger than humans, maybe 7 feet tall. They're strong but not as adaptable as us. They use energy weapons primarily, and they prefer to fight in open areas where they can use their superior firepower." Corporal Linda Ross spoke up from the back of the group. She was small but tough, and had earned her rank by being smarter and more aggressive than Marines twice her size. "What about the Cathara civilians, sir? How do we tell them apart from the enemy?" Chris nodded approvingly. "Another good question. The Cathara are shorter than humans, maybe 5 feet tall. They have fur instead of hair, and their eyes are larger than ours. More importantly, they're herbivores. They don't fight unless they absolutely have to." The training continued for hours. The Marines practiced everything from zero-gravity combat to fighting in dense forests. They learned to use alien communication devices and studied maps of Cathara cities. Most importantly, they learned to work as a team under conditions they had never faced before. While the Marines trained, the ship, crews were running their own drills. Captain Nick Peterson stood on the bridge of Earth's Defiance, watching his crew practice battle maneuvers. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta," Nick ordered. "Evasive pattern Delta, aye, sir," replied Lieutenant Commander Jake Williams at the helm. The ship turned and twisted through a complex series of moves designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. Weapons, target the simulation enemy at bearing 270. "Targeting enemy at bearing 270, responded Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the weapons station. "Lock acquired." Fire. The ship's new plasma cannons fired, sending bolts of superheated energy toward imaginary targets. On the screen, the AIDA computer showed a successful hit. "Good," Nick said. "But remember, we'll be fighting ships that can shoot back, and their weapons are a lot more powerful than anything we've faced before." Similar drills were taking place on Liberty and Justice. Captain Sophie Martinez was known for her creative tactics, while Captain Tony Walsh was famous for his aggressive fighting style. Both would be crucial if they were going to survive against superior numbers and technology. As the ships prepared for departure, Admiral Bennett received regular updates from Amy's communications with the Cathara. The news was getting worse. "Admiral," Amy reported, "Veltar says the Vrakthar have started executing prisoners. They're killing 1,000 Cathara every day to try to break the resistance." Bennett felt sick. Every day they delayed meant more innocent people died, but rushing in unprepared would just get everyone killed and help no one. "What else does he say?" "The Vrakthar are calling us the nightmare species," Amy continued. "They've heard about us from other civilizations. Apparently, humans have a reputation in the galaxy as being so adapted to violence and death that we thrive in conditions that would break any civilized race. Is that good or bad for us?" Amy thought for a moment. "Both. They're scared of us, which might make them hesitate or make mistakes. But they're also preparing specifically to fight humans. They know we're coming." Admiral Bennett nodded. She had expected as much. The element of surprise would have been nice, but she hadn't really counted on it. How much longer until we're ready to leave? She asked. 18 hours, Amy replied. All ships report they'll be ready for departure at 0800 tomorrow. Good. Send a message to Veltar. Tell him the Deathworlders are coming and we're bringing everything we have. Amy smiled and turned back to her communications equipment. Admiral? What should I tell him about our chances of success? Bennett was quiet for a moment, thinking about the odds they faced. 200 enemy ships with superior technology against 3 human ships with untested weapons. By any reasonable measure, it was hopeless. Tell him that humans don't give up, she said finally. Tell him that when someone calls for help, we answer. And tell him that the Vrakthar are about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. As Amy sent the message, Admiral Bennett looked out at the 3 ships that would carry humanity to its first interstellar war. They weren't the biggest ships or the most powerful, but they carried something the Vrakthar had probably never faced before, humans who were angry and determined to protect innocent people. In 18 hours, they would find out if that was enough. 3 weeks of faster-than-light travel felt like 3 years to everyone aboard the human fleet. Admiral Kate Bennett stood on the bridge of Earth's Defiance as they dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Cathera system. What she saw on the main screen made her stomach turn. The planet that should have been green and blue was covered in smoke and fire. Massive ships surrounded it like vultures around a dying animal. The Vrakthar fleet was even larger than intelligence had estimated, and their ships looked like floating cities made of black metal and angry red lights. Jesus Christ, whispered Captain Nick Peterson from beside her. There have to be 300 ships out there. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked up from her communication station, her face pale. Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's Veltar. Put him through. The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with static, but the translator could still make out the words. Human ships, this is Veltar of the Cathara Science Council. We did not think you would really come. The Deathworlders have answered our call. This is Admiral Bennett of the human fleet, Kate replied. We're here to help. What's your current situation? Bad, Veltar responded. The Vrakthar have herded most of our people into containment fields near the major cities. They kill 1,000 of us each day. Our military was destroyed in the first week of fighting. We have perhaps 2 million people left alive out of 40 million. The bridge fell, silent. Everyone had known the situation was bad, but hearing the actual numbers was devastating. Veltar, we're going to get your people out, Admiral Bennett said, but we need you to help us. Can you identify which areas have the most prisoners? Yes, Admiral. I will send you the locations. But please be careful. The Vrakthar leader, War Chieftain Grakmol, has been waiting for you. He says the nightmare species must be taught their place in the galaxy. As if summoned by his name, a new voice broke into the communication channel. It was deep and harsh, speaking in heavily accented English. So the Deathworlders finally arrive, the voice said. I am War Chieftain Grakmol of the Vrakthar Horde. You are smaller than I expected, little humans. 3 ships against my fleet? You should have stayed in your cave planet and left the galaxy to civilized species. Admiral Bennett felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. This is Admiral Bennett. I'm here to ask you once to leave this system and release your prisoners. Grakmol's laughter was like grinding metal. You ask? You have 3 tiny ships and you make demands? Watch, little deathworlder, as I show you what happens to those who challenge the Horde." On the main screen, they watched as a Vrakthar ship fired its main weapon at the planet's surface. A beam of red energy struck one of the containment fields, and thousands of lives were snuffed out in an instant. "You have 1 hour to surrender," Grakmol continued. "Then I will begin destroying all the prisoners, and after that, I will take your ships apart piece by piece." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in furious silence. "Admiral," Captain Peterson said quietly, "we're outnumbered 100 to 1. This is suicide." Admiral Bennett looked at the tactical display showing enemy positions. Peterson was right. By every military calculation, they should run away and hope the Vrakthar didn't follow them back to Earth. "Captain Peterson, are you familiar with the Battle of Thermopylae?" she asked. 300 Spartans against the entire Persian army," Peterson replied. "They all died, Admiral. But they held the pass long enough for Greece to prepare its defenses. Sometimes the point isn't to win. Sometimes the point is to stand up and fight because it's the right thing to do." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "Everyone listen up. We're about to go into battle against impossible odds. No one will think less of anyone who wants to transfer to a support role. This is volunteer only." She waited, but no one moved. Every person on the bridge stayed at their station. "All right, then," Admiral Bennett said with a fierce smile. "Let's show these bastards why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders." The battle began 15 minutes later when Captain Sophie Martinez's carrier Liberty launched the first wave of fighters. The small ships streaked toward the Vrakthar fleet like angry wasps, moving in patterns the aliens had never seen before. "Vrakthar ships are turning to engage our fighters," reported the tactical officer. "They're moving in formation just like Veltar said they would." "Good," Admiral Bennett said. "That's exactly what we want them to do. Captain Peterson, take us in. All ships execute attack pattern chaos." Earth's Defiance accelerated toward the enemy fleet, followed by Liberty and Justice. But instead of approaching in a straight line like civilized space navies, the human ships began to move in completely unpredictable patterns. Peterson used the planet's gravity to slingshot his ship around at impossible angles. The Vrakthar, ships designed for orderly battle lines, couldn't keep up with the human ships that seemed to ignore all normal tactical doctrine. "Enemy ships are trying to target us," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from Weapons. "But their targeting computers can't lock on. We're moving too unpredictably. Fire as we pass," Admiral Bennett ordered. "Hit them hard and keep moving." Earth's Defiance swept past a Vrakthar cruiser, its plasma cannons firing continuously. The experimental weapons, designed based on Kethara intelligence about enemy shields, punched through the alien defenses like they were paper. "Direct hit!" Sarah Kim shouted. "Enemy cruiser is venting atmosphere!" But the victory was short-lived. A dozen Vrakthar ships turned to pursue Earth's Defiance, their much larger weapons charging up to fire. "Incoming!" Peterson yelled, throwing his ship into a spiral dive that used the planet's moon as cover. The Vrakthar energy beams missed, striking the moon instead and blasting huge craters in its surface. But more ships were converging on the human fleet's position. Meanwhile, Captain Tony Walsh was leading Justice and its fighters in a completely different kind of attack. Instead of engaging the main fleet, he was hitting the ships guarding the prisoner containment fields. "Marine transports away," reported his tactical officer. "Colonel Taylor's forces are heading for the surface." On the planet below, Marine Colonel Chris Taylor was leading the most important mission of his life. His transports streaked through, the atmosphere, dodging Vrakthar ground-based weapons as they headed for the largest prison compound. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot shouted over the noise of explosions outside. Chris looked at his Marines. These were good people who had volunteered to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. Sergeant Paul Garcia checked his weapon one more time. Corporal Linda Ross was studying a map of the compound they were about to assault. "Remember," Chris told them, "the Cathara are the good guys. They're shorter than us with fur instead of hair. The Vrakthar are 7 feet tall and ugly as sin. Any questions?" "Just one, sir," Garcia said with a grin. "Are we going to show these bastards what Deathworlders can do?" "Damn right we are," Chris replied. The transport landed hard in the middle of the prison compound. The rear door dropped open and the Marines poured out, weapons firing. The Vrakthar guards, who had been expecting an orderly assault, were completely unprepared for the chaos that erupted around them. Human Marines didn't fight like civilized soldiers. They moved fast, used cover creatively, and adapted their tactics on the fly. When one approach didn't work, they immediately tried something else. The Vrakthar, trained to fight in rigid formations, couldn't cope with enemies who seemed to have no plan at all. "Garcia, take your squad left," Chris shouted, over the sound of weapons fire. "Ross, you're with me. We're going for the main containment field generator." The battle raged across the compound as more human transports landed. The Marines fought their way through Vrakthar defenses that crumbled under the assault of opponents who refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. In space, the naval battle was reaching a critical point. The human ships had destroyed or damaged dozens of Vrakthar vessels, but they were taking damage too. Earth's Defiance had lost 2 weapon systems, and Liberty was venting air from multiple hull breaches. "Admiral," Captain Peterson reported, "we can't keep this up much longer. Our shields are down to 30%. Admiral Bennett nodded grimly. She had known this moment would come. The human fleet had done more damage than anyone had thought possible, but the numbers were still overwhelming. Then Dr. Emma Young's voice came over the communication system from the medical bay. "Admiral, I'm monitoring Vrakthar communications. Their leader is furious. He's screaming at his commanders about human fighting being uncivilized and chaotic." Admiral Bennett smiled. "What exactly is he saying?" "He's ordering his ships to fall back and regroup. Apparently our tactics are so different from what they're used to that they can't adapt. He's calling us death walking among the stars and warning his fleet to be careful. Their weakness," Admiral Bennett said suddenly. "Veltar was right. They're so specialized for conquest that they can't adapt to enemies who fight differently than everyone else." She turned to Peterson. "Captain, signal the fleet. We're going to hit them with everything we have while they're confused." The 3 human ships regrouped and launched their final assault. Earth's Defiance led the charge, its remaining weapons firing at maximum power. 6 months after the Battle of Cathara Prime, Admiral Kate Bennett stood in what used to be a Vrakthar command center and was now the headquarters of the first human embassy in alien space. Through the large windows, she could see the rebuilt Cathara capital city, its new buildings mixing traditional alien architecture with human defensive designs. The changes went far beyond just buildings. Everything in the galaxy had shifted after news of the battle spread. Admiral Bennett was no longer just a military officer. She had become humanity's first ambassador to an entire galaxy full of alien civilizations. "Admiral, you have another." "Delegation requesting a meeting," said Captain Sophie Martinez, who had taken over as Bennett's chief of staff. Her ship Liberty had been repaired and was now part of the growing human fleet stationed in the Cathara system. Which species this? Time? Bennett asked, not looking up from the reports covering her desk. The Drakhari warrior clans, Sophie replied. They want to challenge our best fighters to honorable combat. They say they need to test themselves against the legendary Deathworlders. Bennett sighed. Put them on the list. Right after the Talani, Federation wants to discuss a mutual defense treaty, and the Zephyrian Trade Consortium wants exclusive trading rights with Earth. It had been like this for months. Every major civilization in the galaxy wanted to meet with humans. Some wanted to be friends, others wanted to fight, and a few wanted to hire human soldiers as mercenaries. The legend of the Deathworlders had grown far beyond what actually happened at Cathara Prime. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Bennett called. Dr. Emma Young entered, followed by a tall, thin alien with soft gray fur and large, dark eyes. This was Veltar, the Cathara scientist who had first contacted Earth. Over the past months, he had become Bennett's closest alien advisor and friend. "Admiral," Veltar said in his gentle voice, "I have the latest reports from the refugee processing centers. Since the battle, humans and Cathara had been working together to help aliens who had escaped from Vrakthar slavery in other systems. Word had spread that there was a safe place in Cathara space, protected by the Deathworlders. Refugees arrived every day." "How many this week?" Bennett asked. 47 ships, Emma reported. Mostly families from 3 different species. They're all asking the same question. Is it true that humans protect anyone who asks for help? Bennett looked out the window at the busy spaceport where human and alien ships worked side by side. "What do you tell them?" "The truth," Veltar said. "That humans are the first species in galactic history to answer a distress call from strangers and risk their lives to help people they had never met." There was pride in his voice, but also something like wonder. Even after months of working with humans, Veltar still seemed amazed that such creatures existed. "Admiral," Sophie said, "there's something else. We've received word from Earth. President, Santos wants to speak with you personally." Bennett nodded and walked to the secure communication room. A few minutes later, President Maria Santos appeared on the screen, looking tired but pleased. "Kate, how are things going out there?" "Complicated." "Ma'am," Bennett replied honestly, "every day brings new challenges. Yesterday I had to mediate a dispute between 2 alien species who both wanted to settle on the same moon. This morning I'm dealing with a trade disagreement that could affect 3 different star systems." President Santos smiled. "Welcome to diplomacy. But from what I'm hearing, you're doing an excellent job. The reports reaching Earth are incredible." "What kind of reports?" "Stories about human colonies being established on a dozen different worlds. Trade agreements that are making Earth wealthy beyond our wildest dreams. And most importantly, other species learning that there's someone in the galaxy they can call when they need help." Bennett thought about that. It was true that things had changed dramatically. The small human fleet that had come to Cathara Prime had grown into a permanent presence. More ships arrived from Earth every month, bringing supplies, personnel, and new colonists. "Ma'am, I have to ask about the colonial governor position," Bennett said. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that job." President Santos had offered to appoint Bennett as the governor of humanity's first interstellar colony, which was being built on Thelana, the largest moon of the Cathara homeworld. "Kate, you're exactly the right person," the president replied. "You understand both military necessity and diplomatic reality. Plus, the aliens trust you. That was true. Somehow, Bennett had become the face of humanity to the galaxy. When other species thought of humans, they thought of the admiral who had led the rescue mission to Cathera Prime. "I'll consider it, ma'am," Bennett said. After the call ended, Bennett walked through the embassy complex. In one room, human engineers were working with Cathara scientists to develop better food production systems. In another, Marine Colonel Chris Taylor was training a mixed unit of human and alien security forces. She found Colonel Taylor in the main training facility, where he was teaching Cathara volunteers how to use human weapons and tactics. The sight would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. Gentle herbivores learning combat techniques from human marines. "How are they doing, Chris?" Bennett asked. Chris Taylor looked up from where he was showing a young Cathara how to properly hold a plasma rifle. "Better than I expected, Admiral. They don't have our natural aggression, but they're smart and determined. Give them 6 months of training, and they'll be able to defend their world against anything short of another Vrakthar-level invasion." The young Cathara, whose name was Kelvon, looked up at Bennett with obvious admiration. "Admiral Bennett, is it true that humans learn to fight as children?" Bennett smiled. "Not exactly, Kelvon. We learn to compete as children. Sports, games, arguments with our siblings. By the time we're adults, we're used to conflict and challenge." "That must be why you're such effective warriors," Kelvon said. "On our world, conflict was rare before the Vrakthar came. We had to learn that sometimes fighting is necessary to protect what you love." That evening, Bennett attended a dinner hosted by the Cathara government in honor of the human embassy staff. The dining hall was filled with beings from a dozen different species, all brought together by the changes that had followed the battle. Prime Speaker Nalthi, the elected leader of the Cathara, stood to address the gathering. She was an elderly female with silver fur and kind eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "6 months ago, my people faced extinction," she said, her words translated into multiple languages simultaneously. "We sent a desperate message into space, hoping against hope that someone would hear us and care enough to help." She looked directly at Bennett. "We called out to the Deathworlders, expecting that if they came at all, it would be to conquer us as the Vrakthar had. Instead, they came as protectors. They risked their lives for strangers, and they asked for nothing in return." The hall fell silent as Nalthi continued. "Today, the Cathara declare Admiral Kate Bennett and all humans to be our eternal allies. Our children will learn of the day the Deathworlders came not as conquerors, but as guardians." The applause that followed was thunderous, coming from beings with different types of hands, claws, and appendages, but all expressing the same emotion: gratitude. Later that night, Bennett stood alone on the balcony of her quarters, looking up at the alien stars. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. It was from Jake Morrison, the communications specialist who had first detected the Cathara distress call. He was now the director of Earth's new Galactic Communications Division. "Admiral," his message said, "I thought you should know that we're receiving an average of 12 distress calls per day from different species across the galaxy. Some are asking for help with natural disasters, others with hostile neighbors, and a few are asking for protection from species like the Vrakthar." Bennett felt a mixture of pride and concern. The galaxy was learning that humans would answer calls for help, but there were limits to what they could do. "We can't save everyone, Jake," she replied. "We're still just one species with limited ships and resources." Jake's response came back quickly. "I know that, Admiral. But here's the interesting part. Other species are starting to answer distress calls, too. The Talani Federation just announced they're forming a rapid response fleet based on human tactics. The Drakhari are offering their warriors to protect trade routes from pirates. Bennett smiled. That was something she hadn't expected. Other species were copying human behavior, learning that there was strength in helping others. "The galaxy is changing, Admiral," Jake's message continued. "Before humans arrived, everyone assumed that the strong would always prey on the weak. Now there's a different model. Species are starting to work together instead of just looking out for themselves." As Bennett prepared for sleep in her quarters overlooking an alien city on an alien world, she thought about the chain of events that had brought her here. It had started with one person listening to the darkness between stars and hearing a cry for help. Now that cry had been answered, and the answer was spreading across the galaxy. Other species were learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone weaker than yourself. Her last thought before falling asleep was of the young Marine lieutenant. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Keithera Prime, and Steve Carter was beginning to understand why Admiral Bennett had been reluctant to take the job of colonial governor. He sat in his office on Thelana, the moon that had become humanity's first permanent settlement outside the solar system, reading reports that would have seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. "Governor Carter," his assistant Amy Brooks called from the outer office. "The Zephyrian trade delegation is here for the morning meeting." Steve rubbed his tired eyes. Amy had become invaluable as his diplomatic translator, but some days he wished he could go back to his old job as a city manager in Ohio. At least there, the biggest problem had been fixing potholes and managing snow removal. The Zephyrians entered his office in their flowing robes that seemed to change color based on their mood. Today, the colors were swirling between green and purple, which Amy had taught him meant they were excited, but slightly nervous. "Honored Governor Carter," said their leader, whose name sounded like wind chimes when pronounced correctly. "We bring wonderful news from the Zephyrian Trade Consortium." Steve had learned to be careful when aliens brought wonderful news. Usually it meant they wanted something that would give him a headache. "We're listening," Steve said politely. "Our merchants have established trade routes with 47 different species, all because they want to do business with the famous Deathworlders. Human products are the most sought-after items in the galaxy. That was true. Earth coffee had become more valuable than precious metals on some worlds. Human music was spreading across dozens of civilizations, even simple things like human tools, and clothing were considered exotic and desirable. However, the Zephyrian continued, and Steve knew this was where the real conversation would begin, "We have encountered a problem. The hegemony of pure thought has declared that trade with Deathworlders is contaminating the galaxy with primitive violence." Steve had heard of the hegemony. They were an alliance of species that considered themselves the most advanced and civilized beings in the galaxy. They had never been conquered because they were too arrogant to consider that anyone might try. "What exactly are they doing about it?" Steve asked. "They are intercepting our trade ships and confiscating any human goods. They claim they are protecting the galaxy from corruption by savage species." Amy looked up from her translation device with concern. "Governor, this could be a serious problem. The hegemony controls some of the most important trade routes in the galaxy." Steve nodded. He had been expecting something like this. Not everyone in the galaxy was happy about humanity's growing influence. Some species, especially those who had been comfortable with the old system where the strong dominated the weak, saw humans as a threat to their way of life. I'll need to discuss this with Admiral Bennett, Steve said. In the meantime, please tell your merchants to avoid hegemony space until we can resolve this diplomatically. After the Zephyrians left, Steve walked to the communications center to contact Admiral Bennett. She was currently aboard the Earth's Defiance, which was escorting a convoy of refugee ships to a new settlement in the Outer Rim. Bennett's face appeared on the screen, and Steve could see the bridge of her ship in the background. Even after 2 years, she still looked more comfortable on a military vessel than behind a desk. "Steve, what's the situation?" she asked without preamble. Steve explained about the hegemony's interference with trade ships. Bennett listened with a grim expression. "This isn't just about trade," she said when he finished. "The hegemony is testing us. They want to see if we'll back down when faced with a more powerful opponent." "Are they more powerful?" Steve asked. "On paper, yes. They have thousands of ships and control dozens of star systems. But they've never faced an enemy that fights, like humans do." Steve understood what she meant. The Vrakthar had been defeated not because humans had better technology, but because they fought in ways that confused and demoralized their enemies. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "For now, we try diplomacy. But we also prepare for the possibility that diplomacy won't work." That afternoon, Steve received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Ryan Hughes had arrived from Earth as part of a scientific expedition to study alien biology. But Steve knew him better as one of the advisors who had convinced President Santos to answer the original Kethara distress call. "Ryan, what brings you to our little corner of the galaxy?" Steve asked as they walked through the human section of the colony. "Officially, I'm here to study the effects of different gravity on human development," Ryan replied. "Unofficially, I'm here because Earth is worried about the direction things are heading." They passed a playground where human children were playing alongside young Kethara. The sight still amazed Steve. 2 years ago, these species had never met. Now their children were growing up together. "What kind of concerns?" Steve asked. "The rapid expansion, for one thing," Ryan said. "We have human settlements on 12 different worlds now, and more being established every month. Some people on Earth are worried we're spreading ourselves too thin." Steve nodded. It was a valid concern. Each new settlement required ships, supplies, and personnel that Earth was struggling to provide. "There's also the military situation," Ryan continued. "We now have the largest space fleet in human history, but it's scattered across dozens of star systems. If someone like the hegemony decided to attack Earth directly, we might not be able to defend our home world." That was something Steve hadn't considered. Everyone had been so focused on humanity's expansion into the galaxy that they might have forgotten to protect what they had left behind. "What does President Santos want us to do?" Steve asked. "She wants a realistic assessment of our capabilities and limitations, and she wants to know if we're making more enemies than friends out here." That evening, Steve convened a meeting of the senior staff on Thelana. In addition to Amy Brooks and the usual colonial administrators, he had invited Veltar to represent the Kethara perspective. "Let's be honest about our situation," Steve began. 2 years ago, we were unknown in the galaxy. Now we're famous, but fame can be dangerous. We need to evaluate whether we're heading toward peace or war. Colonel Taylor, who had been promoted to head of colonial security, spoke first. "From a military standpoint, we're stronger than we've ever been. Our ships are battle-tested, our Marines are experienced, and our tactics have proven effective against superior technology. But," he continued, "we're also spread very thin. If multiple enemies attack different settlements simultaneously, we'd have trouble responding to all of them." Amy looked up from her notes. From a diplomatic perspective, we have more allies than enemies. The Cathara, obviously, plus trade. Agreements with the Zephyrians and defense pacts with 6 other species. But the hegemony represents a new type of challenge. Veltar, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. If I may offer a perspective from someone who has watched galactic politics for many years, the hegemony's objection to humans is not really about trade or violence. It is about power. Everyone turned to look at the gentle alien scientist. Before humans arrived, Veltar explained, the galaxy was divided into those who ruled and those who were ruled. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak accepted their fate. The hegemony was comfortable with this system because they were among the strong. Steve began to understand. And now humans have changed that system. Exactly, Veltar said. You have shown that the weak can call for help and receive it. You have proven that strength can be used to protect, rather than to dominate. This threatens everything the hegemony believes about how the galaxy should work. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this. They weren't just dealing with a trade, dispute, or territorial conflict. They were challenging the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. So what do we do? Amy asked. Steve looked around the table at the faces of humans and aliens who had become his advisors and friends. These people represented something new in the galaxy. Different species working together as equals. We do what we've always done, he said finally. We help people who need help. We defend our friends. And we prove that there's a better way to organize a civilization. Colonel Taylor smiled grimly. And if the hegemony doesn't like it, then we'll show them why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders, Steve replied. Outside the windows of the meeting room, the lights of the colony twinkled in the alien darkness. Human families lived side by side with Cathara refugees and traders from a dozen different species. It was a small example of what the galaxy could become if different civilizations learned to work together instead of fighting each other. The question was whether they would get the chance to spread that example, or whether forces like the hegemony would try to crush it before it could grow. Steve had a feeling they were about to find out. Captain Nick Peterson stood on the bridge of Earth's Defiance, watching the tactical display with growing concern. 3 massive hegemony fleets were moving toward human settlements in different parts of the galaxy. It was clearly a coordinated attack designed to test humanity's ability to protect its scattered colonies. Admiral Bennett wants to speak with all ship captains, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communications station. Nick activated his personal communicator and saw Admiral Bennett's face appear on his screen, along with Captain Sophie Martinez from Liberty and Captain Tony Walsh from Justice. All 3 ships were currently at the main human base on Thelana. Captains, we have a problem, Bennett began without preamble. Intelligence reports indicate that hegemony fleets are approaching our settlements at New Eden, Haven Colony, and the mining station at Kepler 186. They're timing their attacks to hit all 3 locations simultaneously. Nick felt his stomach tighten. New Eden was home to 15,000 human colonists and twice as many alien refugees. Haven Colony was smaller, but included the galaxy's first interspecies university. The mining station was strategically important because it produced the rare metals needed for faster-than-light engines. "What are our orders, Admiral?" asked Captain Martinez. "We have to split up," Bennett replied grimly. "Each of you will take your ship and whatever support vessels we can spare to defend one of the settlements. I'll coordinate from here and try to get reinforcements from Earth." Captain Walsh leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, this is exactly what they want us to do. They're forcing us to divide our forces so they can defeat us one by one. I know, Tony, Bennett said, but we can't abandon any of these settlements. If we let even one fall, it will send a message to the entire galaxy that humans can't protect their friends. Nick understood the impossible choice they faced. Military logic said they should concentrate their forces and defend the most important target. But human nature said they couldn't abandon anyone who was counting on them for protection. I'll take New Eden, Nick volunteered. It has the largest population, so the hegemony will probably send their biggest fleet there. I'll take Haven Colony, Martinez said. The university there has students from 23 different species. If the hegemony attacks it, they'll be declaring war on half the galaxy. That leaves me with the mining station, Walsh concluded. It's the smallest settlement, but probably the best defended. Admiral Bennett nodded. Remember, the hegemony has never faced human tactics before. Use that advantage, and stay in communication with each other. If one of you gets in serious trouble, the others need to know. 6 hours later, Nick was approaching. The New Eden system with Earth's Defiance and 2 escort ships. The colony was built on a planet with slightly higher gravity than Earth, which made it perfect for humans but difficult for most other species to visit. Captain, reported the tactical officer, I'm reading multiple ships on the edge of the system. Looks like 15 vessels, all hegemony design. Nick studied the display. 15 ships against his 3. The odds weren't as bad as they had faced at Cathara Prime, but the hegemony ships were newer and more advanced than the Vrakthar vessels had been. Any communication from the hegemony fleet? He asked. Yes, sir. They're demanding that we surrender and prepare to be escorted to a detention facility for questioning about war crimes. Nick almost smiled. War crimes. That was rich, coming from species that had spent centuries ignoring distress calls and letting the strong prey on the weak. Open a channel, he ordered. The main screen showed a tall, pale alien with elongated features and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at him. This was a member of the Ethereal Collective, one of the founding species of the hegemony. I am Archon Velnash of the Hegemony Enforcement Fleet, the alien said in a voice that sounded like it came from a great distance. You will surrender your vessels and submit to judgment for the crime of corrupting the galaxy with primitive violence. This is Captain Peterson of the Earth vessel Defiance, Nick replied calmly. You are approaching a peaceful colony without permission. I'm asking you to leave this system immediately. Asking? Velnash seemed amused. You are in no position to ask anything. Primitive. We have 15 ships to your 3. Your defeat is inevitable. Maybe, Nick said, but you might want to ask the Vrakthar how inevitable they thought their victory was. He cut the communication and turned to his crew. All right, people. The hegemony thinks they know how this fight is going to go. Let's show them their bow wrong. The battle began when the hegemony ships moved into attack formation, approaching in a perfect geometric pattern that looked like something from a military academy textbook. It was exactly the kind of rigid, predictable tactics that humans had learned to exploit. Helm, take us into the asteroid field, Nick ordered. The asteroid belt around New Eden was particularly dense, full of rocky debris that made navigation dangerous, but provided excellent cover. The hegemony ships followed, but their precise formation began to break apart as they tried to avoid collisions. Weapons. Target the lead ship as we pass, Nick commanded. Hit them hard and keep moving. Earth's Defiance swooped between 2 large asteroids and fired its main guns at the hegemony flagship. The experimental plasma weapons, upgraded with technology learned from studying Vrakthar ships, punched through the enemy shields and caused significant damage. "Direct hit," Sarah Kim reported. "Enemy flagship is venting atmosphere." But the hegemony ships were already adapting, spreading out to use the asteroids as cover for their own attacks. These aliens were smarter and more flexible than the Vrakthar had been. "Incoming missiles," the tactical officer warned. Nick threw his ship into a spinning dive that used an asteroid's gravity to accelerate beyond what the inertial dampeners should have allowed. The hegemony missiles, programmed for conventional evasion patterns, couldn't adjust quickly enough and slammed into the asteroid instead. Meanwhile, his escort ships were using their smaller size to dart between the hegemony vessels, firing quick bursts before disappearing back into the asteroid field. The aliens had superior firepower, but they couldn't hit targets that refused to follow predictable flight paths. On the planet below, the colonists were watching the battle through telescopes and sensors. Governor Lisa Park, a former Marine who had volunteered to run the most remote human settlement in the galaxy, was coordinating the evacuation of non-essential personnel. "How are they doing up there?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb, the colony's chief scientist. "Holding their own so far," Lisa replied, watching the tactical display. "But it's 15 against 3. Even Captain Peterson can't keep this up forever." As if summoned by her words, Peterson's voice came through the communication system. "New Eden, this is defiance. We're going to try to draw the hegemony ships away from the planet. If we don't make it back, remember that Earth will send help." Lisa grabbed the microphone. "Defiance? This is Governor Park. You get your ass back? Here in one piece, you hear me? We're not losing anyone today." In space, the battle was reaching a critical point. 2 of the hegemony ships had been destroyed, but one of Nick's escort vessels was badly damaged and struggling to maintain position. "Captain," the tactical officer reported, "the damaged escort is requesting permission to ram the hegemony command ship." Nick felt a chill. Ramming attacks were a last resort, usually meaning the attacking ship and all its crew would be lost, but it was also a tactic that no civilized species would expect. "Negative," he replied. "We don't sacrifice our people unless there's no other choice." Instead, he tried something else that no civilized commander would consider. "All ships, full power to engines. We're going to punch straight through their formation." The 3 human ships accelerated directly toward the center of the hegemony fleet, firing everything they had. The alien commanders, trained in traditional tactics, expected the humans to try to escape or maneuver for advantage. They weren't prepared for enemies who would charge straight into superior firepower. The surprise attack worked. Earth's defiance, and her escorts smashed through the hegemony line, destroying 2 more ships and scattering the rest. The remaining alien vessels, demoralized by the aggressive assault, began to retreat. "Hegemony ships are withdrawing," the tactical officer reported. Nick allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. His communicator was already chiming with reports from the other battles. Captain Martinez's voice came through clearly. "New Eden. This is Liberty. Haven Colony is secure. The hegemony attacked the university, but when the alien students started fighting alongside the humans, their fleet decided to withdraw." Captain Walsh's report was more grim. "The mining station took heavy damage, but we held. Lost 6 good people, though." Admiral Bennett's voice joined the conversation from Thelana. "All captains, report your status." "New Eden is secure," Nick reported. "Minimal casualties, but we're going to need repairs." "Haven Colony secure," Martinez confirmed. No human casualties, though several alien students were injured defending their school. Mining station secure, Walsh added. We'll need significant repairs and replacement personnel. There was a pause before Bennett spoke again. Captains, I've been monitoring hegemony communications during the battle. They're 5 years after the first alien distress call had reached Earth. Jake Morrison stood in the newly completed Galactic Communications Center on Luna. The facility was 10 times larger than the original monitoring station where he had first heard the Cathara's desperate plea for help. Through the massive windows, Jake could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going from the lunar spaceport. The sight still amazed him. 5 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now the solar system was a major hub of galactic civilization. Director Morrison called his assistant, a young woman named Kelly Ross who had been assigned to help manage the hundreds of daily communications between Earth and the growing network of human settlements. We have an incoming priority message from Admiral Bennett. Jake nodded and walked to his private communication station. Admiral Bennett appeared on the screen, but she wasn't aboard a ship this time. She was standing in what looked like a massive conference hall filled with beings from species Jake didn't recognize. Jake, I wanted you to be the first to know, Bennett said with a smile that looked tired but genuinely happy. The Galactic Council has just voted to establish the Mutual Protection Compact. 47 different species have signed on. Jake felt a surge of pride and amazement. What exactly does that mean, Admiral? It means that any species can call for help, and every member of the compact pledges to respond if they're able. It's the Cathara distress call on a galactic scale. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, there would be an organized system for protecting the weak from the strong. No more species would face extinction alone while the galaxy watched and did nothing. How did you convince them all to agree to it? Jake asked. Bennett's expression grew serious. Honestly, we didn't have to convince anyone. After watching what happened with the hegemony, most species realized they had a choice. Join a system based on mutual protection, or risk being conquered by someone stronger. That made sense. The 3 simultaneous battles against hegemony forces had sent a clear message throughout the galaxy. Humanity would fight anyone who threatened innocent people regardless of the odds or the cost. What about the hegemony itself? Jake asked. That's the most interesting part, Bennett replied. They've requested membership in the compact. Jake's jaw dropped. The same aliens who called us primitive and violent? The very same. Apparently, their Archon Council has decided that if they can't beat us, they should join us. They're offering their advanced technology and industrial capacity to help protect other species. It was an amazing transformation. The hegemony had spent centuries believing that might made right. Now they were volunteering to use their might to protect the weak. There's something else, Bennett continued. The Council has asked me to become the first Director General of the Mutual Protection Compact. It's basically the same job I've been doing, but now it's official and covers the entire galaxy. Jake grinned. Congratulations, Admiral, or should I say, Director General Bennett. I haven't accepted yet, she replied. I wanted to talk to some people first. People like you who were there at the beginning. Jake understood what she was asking. This job would make Bennett the most powerful human in galactic history, responsible for coordinating the defense of dozens of worlds and billions of people. What do you think, Jake? Should I take it? Jake looked out the window at the busy spaceport again. A Kethara science vessel was docking next to a human cargo ship. In the distance, he could see the massive bulk of a hegemony battleship that was now serving as a mobile hospital for refugee populations. "Admiral, do you remember what you told the Vrakthar leader right before the Battle of Kethara Prime?" "I told him that humans don't give up," Bennett replied. "That's right, and we don't. 5 years ago, we answered one distress call. Now we're building a system to answer all of them. I think you should take the job." Bennett nodded slowly. "I think you're right, but I'm going to need help. Good people in key positions throughout the galaxy." "What did you have in mind?" "Well, for starters, I need someone to run the new Galactic Emergency Response Center. Someone who knows how to listen for distress calls and coordinate rescue missions." Jake felt his heart race. "Are you offering me a job, Admiral?" "I'm offering you the most important job in the galaxy, Jake. You'd be responsible for making sure that no distress call goes unanswered, ever again." Before Jake could respond, his console chimed with an incoming message from Earth. President Santos appeared, on a secondary screen, looking pleased but slightly overwhelmed. "Jake, Admiral Bennett, I hope you're both available. I have news from Earth that affects everyone." "What's the situation, Madam President?" Bennett asked. "Congress has just approved the Galactic Citizenship Act," Santos replied. "Any intelligent being who pledges loyalty to the principles of the Mutual Protection Compact can become a citizen of Earth and enjoy full human rights and protections." Jake whistled softly. That was a revolutionary concept. For the first time in human history, citizenship wouldn't be based on species or place of birth, but on shared values. "How are people reacting?" Bennett asked. "Better than I expected," Santos said. There was some debate, but the deciding factor was a speech given by Lieutenant Danny Clark. He pointed out that humans had always been defined by our actions, not our biology. He said that anyone willing to risk their life to protect others was human in the ways that mattered most. Jake remembered Danny Clark, the young Marine who had spoken up during the original debate about answering the Kethara distress call. His words had helped convince the Global Defense Council to send the rescue mission that changed everything. "There's more," President Santos continued. "We've received formal applications for Earth citizenship from over 1 million beings across the galaxy. They want to be part of what they're calling the Deathworlder family." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Jake's communication system. He looked at the display and saw it was a priority distress call from the Outer Rim. "Excuse me," Jake said, "but I need to take this." He opened the channel and heard a familiar pattern of sounds, mathematical sequences followed by desperate pleas for help. But this time, the translation came through immediately. "This is the merchant vessel Star Dancer," the message said. "We are under attack by raiders in the Epsilon Eridani system. Our cargo hold contains medical supplies for the refugee camps on New Harmony. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." Jake looked at Admiral Bennett on the screen. "Admiral, we have a distress call." Bennett smiled. "Then we answer it. That's what we do." Jake began typing commands into his console, automatically coordinating a response from the nearest compact vessels. Within minutes, he had dispatched 2 human patrol ships and a hegemony rapid response team to the Epsilon Eridani system. "Star Dancer, this is the Galactic Emergency Response Center," Jake transmitted. "Help is on the way. Estimated arrival time is 47 minutes. Hold on." The grateful response came back immediately. "Thank you, Response Center. We knew someone would answer." The Deathworlders always answer. As Jake coordinated the rescue mission, he realized that this was what the galaxy had become, a place where distress calls were answered, where the strong protected the weak and where no one faced danger alone. President Santos was still on the screen, watching the rescue coordination with obvious pride. "Jake, Admiral Bennett, I want you both to know how proud Earth is of what you've accomplished out there." "It's not just us, Madam President," Bennett replied. "This is what happens when good people decide to help each other. Humans just showed the galaxy that it was possible." "The vote on my nomination for Director General is tomorrow," Bennett continued. "If it passes, my first official act will be to establish the Universal Distress Call Protocol. Every ship, every station, every settlement in compact space will monitor for emergency transmissions. No call for help will ever go unheard again." Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. 5 years ago, he had been a lonely technician listening to the empty darkness between stars. Now he was about to become the coordinator of a galaxy-wide rescue network. "Admiral," he said, "my answer is yes. I'll take the job." "President Santos," Bennett added, "please inform Congress that I accept the nomination. It's time to make this official." As the three humans concluded their conversation, Jake received a status update on the rescue mission. The raider attack had been repelled, the medical supplies were safe, and the Star Dancer was continuing its journey to New Harmony. Just another day in the new galaxy, where distress calls were answered and the strong protected the weak. Jake looked out the window one more time at the ships coming and going from Luna. Somewhere out there, a young communications officer was, probably listening to space, just as he had 5 years ago. And if that officer heard a call for help, they would know exactly what to do. The Deathworlders had kept their promise. They had changed the galaxy forever, turning it from a place where might made right into a place where right made might, and they were just getting started. In the distance, Jake could see new ships arriving every day, carrying refugees who had heard that there was a place in the universe where people helped each other. They came seeking protection, but many of them stayed to become protectors themselves. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known, that the strong